Welcome to another episode of Ron's Reloading Channel. I'm going to show you how to properly set up your dies to reload straight wall cartridges today. Stay tuned. Here I have a 3-set die to reload 38 Special or 357 Magnum. You can load both calibers with this particular die set. So the die to the far left is your sizing die and your decapping die. As you can see, it has the long spindle right here, and normally that your decapping pin would come down about 1/8 of an inch below your die. Here I have the case mouth expansion die. So what this die does is it expands the case mouth to where you can seat your projectile in. This die to the far right is your seating die and your crimping die. So with this particular die, it will do a roll crimp because we are loading for a revolver. And up here in the middle is your shell plate. And I will show you how to set those all up here in just a minute. To set up my sizing die, what I do is that I am loading on a Hornady lock and load single stage press. I'll just insert the die, turn it about 1/4 turn. You'll feel it lock into place. Loosen up your ring, and what I will do is I'll back out the sizing die, and then I'll lift the ram to insert my shell plate. To properly set up your sizing die, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the ram all the way up, and you can see the shell plate holder. And what I will do is I will turn my sizing die downward till it makes contact with that shell plate. Once I have contact on the shell plate, I will just lock my ring down. And then I'll feel for the cam over. So I got a little bit of cam over on it, so that's what I'm looking for. And if I wanted to decap at the same time, then I would just run the spindle down, and you can see that the decapping pin is moving down. So if you don't have a universal decapping die, this is the way to do it. How you want to set up your decapping pin is you want to run it down about 1/8 of an inch past your die, and then you can just lock it in. Okay, now that we have our sizing die set up, what I will do is insert the brass, lift up on it, you'll feel a little cam over, and come back down on the ram. Pretty simple process. If you notice that I'm not using any sizing wax or lube, these are carbide dies and with a straight wall cartridge, so you really don't need it. So once I have all my brass resized, I will chamfer and deburr the brass. Chamfering and deburring your brass. I do have a Hornady chamfer and deburring tool. So with new brass, I'll just simply turn it on, run it just like that. You don't have to have extreme pressure down on it to clean the case mouth of the brass. Chamfering and deburring your brass. Just turn my tool on, give it light pressure. Setting up the case mouth expansion die. So I'm just going to insert it into the press. Give it a twist, fill it will lock in place. I'm backing the die out because when I lift the ram, I don't want my brass hitting my case mouth expansion die. So I'll bring it up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the die downward till I feel resistance. So I got some resistance about right here. So what I will do is I'll back the ram down, and then I'm going to give it another quarter turn. Finger tight my lock ring. Then I'm going to bring the brass back up. So what I'm doing is now I'm going to seat a projectile into the case mouth to see if it fits. So it doesn't quite fit all the way. So what we need to do is we need to turn the die down some more to expand the case mouth a little bit more. So actually that looks pretty good, that the projectile barely fits into the case. So that's what we're looking for. So once I get that all set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock my O-ring down, or my lock ring. And then I will just start the process over again. Then I will check it just to make sure that the projectile fits into the case mouth. Do a couple more here for you. So now that we have our brass sized, chamfered, deburred, and the case mouth has been expanded. If you've noticed, I have not loaded the primer into the primer pocket just yet. This is how I do it. Now that I have my brass pretty much prepped, I'll go ahead and I'll start seating the primers. I do have my primer seating arms marked with an S and an L. I do have two different seating arms, so I'm just going to insert the primer seating arm just like that. Now what I will do is I will take out my case mouth expansion die and just keep no die in it like this. So we're going to use the CCI number 550 primers. They are a Magnum small pistol primer. So this is what we'll be loading up for 357 Magnum. So with the Hornady single stage press, I'll just insert the primer into the primer seating arm, lift up on the ram a little bit, and just push it forward a little bit. And then what I will do is I will run my finger or thumb just to make sure that it is sitting flush with the brass. Doesn't take a whole lot of force to seat them. So I'm going to be dispensing my powder with the Frankfurt Arsenal IntelliDropper. I will be using Hodgdon H110, and I am going to be throwing 15.0 grains of powder. So I've given this a chance to warm up, and now we're just throwing powder. So now I've gotten a stable indication on my electronic powder thrower. And what I like to do is I like to move it over onto my beam scale to cross-check the powder throw to make sure that we are good to go on it. So I'm at 15.0 grain on the beam scale as well as my digital scale. So I'll just load the powder up and we're off to the next one. Once again, I'll check my powder throw. And it's that simple. So now I'm going to be dispensing my powder with my Frankfurt Arsenal. I did change the mode from manual to automatic. So when I put the powder pan on the scale, it will zero out and then it will automatically throw 15.0 grains of powder. So now that I've got it stabled, I'll come over and check on my beam scale. Looks good on the beam scale. Load the powder into the case, and I'll put my pan back on the Frankfurt Arsenal scale, and it'll start throwing another powder charge. We'll do one more to give you a good idea on how I like to weigh my powder and throw the amount of powder that I'm looking for with what the recipe book calls for. I'm using the Hornady 11th edition for my recipe book. So I'm throwing 15.0 grain of H110 for 357 Magnum that I'm using a 158 grain XTP projectile. Now that we have our powder in our cases, we're going to set up the seating and crimping die. So what I like to do is make sure that the seating stem is up pretty far, and I'll just insert the die into the press, give it a quarter turn to make sure it's locked down. And what I will do is I will stick a case into the shell plate holder. I will bring the ram up, and now I'm turning the whole die down. Till I feel some resistance about right here. And then what I want to do is I want to back the die off about one turn. So I do have the top of my die marked. So there's a half turn. There's one turn. I'll bring my lock ring down. Lock that into place. And at this point, you can seat and crimp all together in one stroke. But what I like to do is I like to seat the projectile first, and then I will come back and do my roll crimp. If I were loading this up onto my auto progressive press, then I would set my die to seat and roll crimp all in one stroke. and 1.895, so I'm really close. So just remember that right now all we are doing is just seating the projectile. And I will go through and I will measure each case as I seat the projectile. Now that we have our projectile seated, I will show you how to set the die up to perform the roll crimp. So what I do is I'll bring the seating stem up real high. That way when we lift the ram, the stem is not going to push down on the top of the projectile and ruining our overall length. So how I get it to crimp is I will bring the whole die up a little bit, lift the ram, and I will screw the die back down till I feel resistance. And I'll bring the ram back down, and I'm gonna turn my die clockwise about 1/8 of a turn. So I feel a little bit of cam over at the end of the stroke, so that's where I want to be at. And looking at the roll crimp, I could probably turn it just a little bit more to get a good roll crimp on this 357 Magnum load. And that looks good. The reason why we want a good roll crimp on the case is because it will prevent bullet creep. Now what bullet creep is that from the inertia, it will want to try to move your projectile forward and it would cause cylinder lock. So once again, we'll just insert the case up and down, and I've got a really good roll crimp on that to prevent bullet creep. And I like to go and check the projectile ever so often, just to make sure that we're still getting a good roll crimp. For all you new reloaders out there, I certainly hope that you find this video helpful and educational. So until then, keep on reloading.